helping us to know our rights, and feel free to ask him any questions you like. We know they are busy. We know they are running around from masjid to other masjids, and we are lucky with Tariq. Thank you, Tariq.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you so much for having me here today. As the introduction mentioned, I'm here from the Association of Muslim American Lawyers. I'm an attorney as well. I practice in civil rights. My law firm practices in immigration and civil rights law, employment discrimination, and things like that. So the primary reason that I'm here today is because, as you all know, the White House issued an executive order on immigration, and the immediate response, there's two responses that we had initially. First response was it created a lot of chaos at the airports with people being detained and things like that, which was about 2 weeks ago, if you all remember. It's 2 Saturdays ago, and the airports were filled with protesters and there was a lot of chaos. People were being detained and things like that. So our first immediate response was to make sure that those people were released and that was taken care of. The second response is a more long-term one, which is what we're doing now, which is to go out and get the information to the people, that everybody should know what's happening, what exactly legally does it mean when they issue an executive order, what rights you have and what rights are being infringed upon. And it's very important for all of us to be aware of that. So what we're doing now is we're going around to all the masajid and getting the information out. So we formed a coalition with several organizations to do that in New Jersey. We're part of some coalitions in New York as well. In New Jersey, it's the ACLU of New Jersey. It's the Association of Muslim American Lawyers. It's the New Jersey Muslim Lawyer Association. It's the American Friends Service Committee, which is a Quaker organization. So we've all sort of come together and we've delegated out several masajid. This weekend alone, there were 5 programs in New Jersey. And this weekend, there were 3 yesterday. And so this is part of our continuing tour of knowing your rights. Inshallah, the breakdown of it is I'm going to go over what exactly happened with the executive order. It's been 2 weeks now and a lot has been happening. So I'm going to kind of recap everything that took place over the last 2 weeks, and then we'll talk about what your rights are going forward. And then inshallah we'll open it up for questions and answers. If you have any, I'll keep the questions to general questions you may have, and I'll answer them. If you have specific, questions about, in private things, we can talk about it later. I'll be around after Isha, inshallah. Should they pray Isha later or they pray already? You prayed Isha already, okay. Okay, sir. So as we all know, the White House, the president signed the executive order on January 27th of this year. The executive order stated that there was a hard ban, like a total ban, on immigrant and non-immigrant visas coming into this country from 7 countries that were mentioned. The 7 countries were Syria, Sudan, Somalia, Libya, Iran, Iraq, and Yemen. So those countries, there was a hard bar. If you had a visa from one of those countries and you were outside the U.S., you could not enter the United States, even if your visa was valid. That was a hard bar. Now, what made it more problematic was, although the text of the executive order said it bars any aliens, immigrant or non-immigrant, from entering, a green card holder is technically a legal permanent resident, sometimes known as a legal resident alien. So the question became whether or not a green card holder fell under that bar or not. From the text of the executive order, it would appear no. However, the president's advisor, Steve Bannon, personally had the Customs and Border Patrol, which is the organization on the airports that when you come in, you're coming in through customs. He instructed Customs and Border Patrol to detain green card holders. Okay, that was the order that came directly from the White House's advisor 2 Saturdays ago. As a result of that, Customs started stopping all green card holders. It stopped citizens that were, they had American citizens, but they were nationals of one of those countries, whether Syria or Sudan or one of those countries. They stopped green card holders, not just from the 7 countries, but from any Muslim majority countries. So 2 Saturdays ago, we saw this chaotic scene play out all over the country. And people were coming back from wherever. Some people went to Canada, some people went on vacation or things like that, and they were coming back, and they had green cards and citizenships, and they were barred from entering the country. And of course, that's when the lawyers went in. ACLU was one of the foremost organizations involved in this, and they went in immediately. That first Saturday, they got an order from the judge, a temporary ban, which lasted for 7 days, on the executive order. And ultimately, we were able to get all the detainees out that day. Excuse me. The day later, which was the Sunday following that Saturday, the White House issued a statement clarifying that green card holders would not come under the ban, that the ban wasn't supposed to apply to green card holders. Right, and that was the initial chaos that happened. Since then, the White House has clarified that it doesn't apply to green card holders, but it will still apply to visas of any kind, immigrant, non-immigrant visas. Now, fast forward to last Friday. Washington State, the state of Washington, challenged the president on this. The state of Washington claimed, and I don't want to go too much into the details of the law and what they challenged, but basically they said that it's affecting their economy. It's affecting their state universities in Washington because their professors or students had visas or were foreigners, and it was affecting their economy and their ability to run their system, and that the immigration ban was illegal or unconstitutional. So they filed that lawsuit, and they also filed for a temporary restraining order. A temporary restraining order basically means that the federal judge would say that while we determine whether or not this is unconstitutional, like while this case is going on in court, should there be a hold on that executive order. So the federal judge in Washington agreed with the state of Washington and said that while we determine whether or not this is unconstitutional, the executive order is suspended. Okay, so that happened last Friday. The White House challenged that to appellate court, and of course the appellate court agreed with the district court, and so the suspension stands. So this is where we are right now. So as we speak right now, today, the executive order that the White House issued is suspended. It's as if it never existed. So, we'll go with that. Now, this matter is still being adjudicated in court. So the courts are still going to decide on this eventually, like a final ruling. But the temporary restraining order suspends it, and then the courts are going to determine this, and there'll be a final ruling. It may happen also that the president would modify the text of the order and issue a new executive order with a modified text or something like that. We'll wait to see that. So as a result of I would say the unclarity, we're not sure what would happen. We're not sure whether or not they would win in court ultimately. We're not sure whether the president would issue a modified order. Our job is to get information to the people. This is what you should do, in this situation when you're flying overseas. So we'll get to that part now. Just by a show of hands, how many people here is anybody here a national of one of the seven countries that I mentioned? Syria, Sudan, Somalia. Okay. So there's three categories that most of us are going to fall into, right? So you're going to be a U.S. citizen. Okay. If you are a U.S. citizen and you have a U.S. passport, you have a legal right to be in this country. You have an absolute legal right to be in this country. I want to repeat that because I think sometimes people, even when they have a citizenship, they're not sure what's going to happen. If you have a U.S. passport, you have a right to be in the country. That means by law, they have to let you into the country. So if you've flown out and you come back in, you have a U.S. passport, there should be no reason why you would be denied entry to the United States. There's no legal reason why. You may be pulled off for what they call a secondary screening, a secondary assessment or something, and they might pull you to the side. And some of us have experienced this already. They pull you into the side, they pull you into a room, customs will ask you additional questions. That may still happen, but nothing that you say in that room should bar you from entering the country. So that's one point very clear. U.S. citizen, you have a right to be in this country. If you have a green card, you are a legal permanent resident, you also have a valid entry into the United States. You would be letting, even if you are national of one of the 7 countries I mentioned, but you have a green card, you will be allowed into the country, right? If you're national of the Muslim majority countries, or if you're national of one of those 7, it doesn't matter. You have a green card, you will be allowed into the country. Now, this is what we've seen happen with green card holders. Some of these incidents happened last week that we heard of. There's at least 2 that we're fully familiar with. Customs will pull to the side people either from those 7 countries or they're actually pulling aside people from Muslim majority countries in general. So everybody should be really cautious with this. And if you have a green card, you do have a right to enter, but what they're doing is they're sort of pressuring you. They're asking you a lot of questions, a lot of very difficult questions, and they're lying to you. They're telling you like, oh, we know this about you, or so and so we know said this and this about you, or something like that. And then they say that, you know, you can go to jail for this, or you can go to jail for that. And then they'll say, look, just sign this, and then you won't go to jail. Just sign this, and you won't go to jail. So if there's one point I would like everybody to remember from this talk, it's that do not sign anything. If you're at the airport and you're coming back and they pull you in for a second screening, do not sign anything. Never sign any document whatsoever, okay? There was 2 incidences of people under the same scenario. They were kind of pressured and kind of threatened by the customs. Customs presented them with the I-407 form and had them sign it. The I-407 form revokes your green card. It's you voluntarily revoking your green card. So, yeah. So even though you have a right to be in this country with the green card, you can revoke your green card, and what they do is they threaten you into signing it yourself. Now the CBP, the customs on their own website, when asked this question if the customs agents are doing that, did not say no, they didn't deny it. All they said was anybody who's voluntarily revoked their green card did it voluntarily. That's all they said. So they're not even denying that they're trying to pressure people into doing this. And we know of 2 incidences that did happen within the last 2 weeks. So it's very, very important that I get that point across. If you're a green card holder, well, if anybody, but especially if you're a green card holder, you're coming in, you're inside, do not sign any documents while you're there. Okay, and don't sign anything. You don't even have to say like, let me read it first. It doesn't matter. Don't sign it. There's absolutely nothing that you should be signing at that. It just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what country you're national. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter. Nothing matters. Don't sign anything. Now the question comes up: well, what rights do you have coming into an airport? When you're coming to an airport or you're crossing a border, like you're crossing the border from Canada or Mexico, or you're coming into an airport, you have fewer rights than you would, say, on the street here. Right? If you're driving down the street and a cop pulls you over and starts asking you all kinds of questions, you don't have to answer any of them. You could just say, I exercise my right to remain silent. You don't have to answer anything to the cop. Now, when you're coming in an airport or you're coming over a border, you don't have that right fully. So certain questions they ask you, you have to answer them, okay? You have to. So if they ask you questions, but they're normal questions, okay? So I'll tell you the kind of questions you should answer. If they ask you who you are, where you live, your name, your address, you have to answer that. If they ask you where did you go, you have to answer that. If they ask you why you went there, you have to answer that. If they ask you how long you stayed there, you have to answer that. Anything beyond that, you should not answer, okay? Use your judgment. If it's a question that's also not one of those, but it's also a simple, fairly simple question, you can answer. But anything beyond that, you do not have to answer. So if they start asking you, what do you think about President Trump? Or if they ask you, what do you think about ISIS? Or do you support Bashar Assad? If they ask you questions like that, do not answer. Absolutely, you don't have to answer those questions. Do not feel pressure to answer anything like that. They might ask you questions like, what's that? Yes. Okay, so what they'll do normally is they'll say, your name, address, where did you travel? You said, you say I went to, I went to Cairo, or I went to so-and-so, or I went wherever. And they say, why'd you go there? You say, I went to visit my family. And then they say, okay. And then they'll say, okay, do you know Omar Khalifa, right? Do you know, what do you think about Bashar Assad? Do you support? At that point, you say, look, I answered the questions you asked me, and I exercise my right not to answer anymore. If you want to ask me any more questions, I'd like to have my lawyer present. If you're a U.S. citizen, you have way more rights. If you're a U.S. citizen and they ask you this question and you say, look, I've answered your questions, I identified myself. If you have any questions, I want my lawyer. I want a lawyer present, something along those lines. They might say things like, look, if you just answer the question, we'll get you out of here faster. You're coming back from a long trip, usually coming back from a long flight, you're tired, you want to get out of customs, you want to get your bags and go home. They're going to say, look, just answer the questions, we'll get you out of here faster. Don't listen to them. It's not going to help you. If you answer any questions, it's not going to help you. Okay, I want to get to that in a bit. Let me just get to this part. The other part about it is never ever lie to a customs officer. Do not lie. Don't say something like, don't make up even a small lie like how long you were there or why you went to visit or things like that or who you know or whatever. Don't lie. Absolutely don't lie. Because one of the things they're doing is they're trying to get you to lie, because if you lie to a federal officer, a customs officer, or FBI, anything like that, that in itself is a crime. lying to a federal officer is a crime which is punishable by 5 years in prison. So do not lie. Tell them the answer, but tell them the answer in the shortest possible way. If they say, you say, come back, I went to Cairo. They say, why'd you go to Cairo? I went to visit my family. That's it. You've answered the question. Don't tell them like I went to visit my family in Cairo, but then we went to Alexandria for a few days and then I had a meeting with somebody. You don't have to go into that. You don't need to go into any kind of details. I went to visit my family, you're done. You answer the question, you don't need to answer more. If they press you, just say, look, I went to Cairo, I went to visit my family, I'm tired, I'd like to go home. If you have any more questions, I'd like to have my lawyer present. That's it. Now it's, obviously they're gonna pressure you and it's gonna be like, they're gonna make you feel like if you answer the question, you can have that faster. You have to assert your right. So that's the right that you do have, but they're not gonna give you the right automatically, you have to assert your right. I've answered your questions, I'm tired, I wanna go home. If you have more questions, I'd like to have my lawyer present, that's it. Green card holders as well. Green card holders as well. Because the green card holder gives you a legal right to be in this country. Even if you're from Syria or Sudan or Somalia or one of those countries, you still have a right to be in this country. Same thing. You can say, look, if you answered those basic questions. If you have any more questions, I'd like to have my lawyer present. The basic questions are fair. So basic questions: your name, where you live, where did you travel, why did you travel there, like that. Those are basic questions. What's that? Yeah, if they ask you your occupation, just tell them truthfully what your occupation is. That's it. And in the simplest and shortest form possible, right? The fewer words that come out of your mouth, the better. But absolutely do not lie. Don't make up something. Don't try to, just don't.
How about who came as a refugee? If he came as a refugee from one of these countries.
Okay. I'll get to the refugees in a bit. I'll get to the refugees in a bit. Let me just cover. I'm going to go through each of the classes and then we'll get to the refugees shortly. So a question came up about the phones. So like I said, you have fewer rights coming in through the borders. They do have a right to your phone, your laptops. Now, if they ask you for your phone, you have to give it to them, right? So you have to give the phone to them. If you have a numerical lock, like I have a numerical lock, if you have a numerical lock and they say unlock it, you don't have to unlock it. You just give the phone to them, that's all you're supposed to do. If they ask you to unlock it, you don't have to. You can say, look, I've given you a phone, I don't have to unlock it. If you want me to unlock it, I'd like to speak to my lawyer first. Now, they're gonna tell you, hey look, if you unlock your phone, you're gonna get out of here faster. That's a trap. If you unlock it, they're gonna go through your text, your social media, your emails, and all those kind of things. And it's gonna open up a whole new can of worms. They're gonna start nitpicking on who you know and what they said and things like that. So, don't unlock it. Just say, look, this is my phone. Make sure you have a numerical lock when you're traveling. A good idea would be if you're traveling, don't take your normal phone or just buy like a temporary phone that you just for the travel purposes and that's it. That's just for communication purposes. That's my recommendation. Some people need to take their phones. If you have your phone, have a numerical lock and just assert your right to not unlock it, but you have to give them the phone. Yeah, that's fine. And just answer that. It's not a problem because you shouldn't be so in that situation you would have your regular phone, and I mean your throwaway phone that you bought for the travels. You have your primary phone at home. Just say this is a phone I brought to travel. They're not gonna say go home and get your phone. They can't. They're not gonna ask that. So that's basically how that works. So those are the rights you have coming back in. Yeah, once you answer those normal questions, you don't have to answer anything beyond that. But what I wanted to let you know is that you do have to answer those normal questions. And you should answer them truthfully. I want to really emphasize that point. Don't think that you can lie to them or say, I don't know, or just kind of the normal questions you can and you should answer. I mean, you should definitely answer them, and you should answer them truthfully, and you should answer them in the fewest amount of words possible. Anything beyond that, you will assert your right on your lawyer, and that's it.
Just the basic, simple questions, not the details.
Exactly, yes.
What's primary and secondary screening?
Oh, the primary screening is just what everybody goes through. Just coming off the plane, they scan your passports, and I think they have the kiosk now where they scan your passports, or you go to a customs officer, they stamp it in. That's the primary. Secondary is when they pull you to the side and they take you in for further questioning. That's secondary. So primary is what everybody coming off the plane goes through. Yeah, primary is what everybody goes through. Secondary is they pull aside certain people. Now this is for most Muslims. This has been happening for years. Most Muslims are used to kind of getting pulled off and kind of getting questions asked, and this happened more so. What we're noticing now is that this might be happening a little bit more, one of the things that happened is that there was the order from the judge, which suspended the executive order. So, the White House said this, and then this was suspended, and then the judge said this is suspended. But Customs wasn't still, at the airports, Customs wasn't necessarily following the judge's order. And we saw a couple cases of that as well, where Customs is not doing that. In that case, ACLU had to send their lawyers, assert, here's the order from the judge, and demand them that they follow the order. So we had a few cases of that as well. And I'm just trying to so one thing I don't want to do is I don't want to create any kind of panic or hysteria, things are really terrible or things like that. I just want everybody to be cautious, right? Take your precautions, and inshallah everything will be fine, but just make sure you know these things, and so you can take the precautions when you do travel. The next class I want to talk about is people that have visas. Okay. If you have the first thing, and this is another point that I want everybody to remember, and if you can relate this information, it will be good as well. If you have a valid visa, or you know somebody that has a valid visa, that's from one of the 7 countries I mentioned, but they're currently overseas, they need to get back in the United States immediately, right now. So if somebody you know has a valid visa, and they're a national of one of the 7 countries I mentioned, and they're currently overseas, even if they're in Canada or they're overseas somewhere, they need to get back in the United States immediately. They need to get a plane ticket this week and get back in. Because right now, the executive order is suspended. And so while it's suspended, they'll be able to get back in, and they shouldn't have too much of an issue getting back in. They'll be able to get back in right now. We don't know what's going to happen. The executive order might come back into place, in which case it would be a hard bar from their entry. They would not be able to enter, even if their visa is valid. So people that had student visa, and they were studying here, and they're Syrian national or Yemeni national, and they went to travel overseas, even if they went to Canada or I know one of the cases was somebody just went to Cancun for a vacation or something like that. Their student visa, they went to travel, and then the order came into effect overnight. It's it. You can't come back in the country. The entry, even if your visa is valid, you're hard bar. You can't enter anymore. So right now, while it's suspended, we don't know how long that suspension will last. It's going to depend on the courts and how this case turns out. But the things you can do to take the most precaution, if you have a valid visa, somebody with a valid visa, they're from more than 7 countries, get back in the country now. And my advice, and this is my advice generally, is if you have a valid visa and you're from any Muslim majority country and you intend to be in the United States, get back in the United States right now, because we're not sure how this is going to be affecting the travel. So when you have a visa is different than a green card and a citizenship, because a visa is a privilege that the United States is granting you, and they can unilaterally, on their own discretion, revoke it. So if you have a visa, if you have a visit visa and you're entering the United States, Customs can revoke your visa right there if they want to. They can stop you from entering, they can revoke your visa, and you have to go back. So visas are not the strongest legal documents to enter the country. They're like a privilege. They grant you this privilege, go ahead and enter. If they say, look, we revoke it, they revoke it. You have no say in it. Whereas the citizenship and the green card, they can't revoke it. You can revoke your green card, but the Customs can't revoke your green card. So a visa is a much weaker sort of document to enter on. But right now, while the suspension is in place and the executive order is suspended, it's a good time for anybody that has a visa that's overseas, that was intending to come to the United States, come now. Come as soon as you can and stay here. And if you have a visa and you want to travel outside the country, I would not recommend that. If you have a visa and you want to travel outside the US, and you're from any Muslim majority country, if you're from one of the 7 countries, definitely not. So if you have a visa and you're in the United States right now, and you're from one of the 7 countries I mentioned, you should definitely not travel outside the United States, because it could be that this thing, because the thing happens overnight, and your flight could be in midair, and it could be back into effect. So do not travel outside the United States. If you have a valid visa and you're from a Muslim majority country, but that's not one of those 7, you're from Egypt or Jordan or something like that, or Pakistan or Afghanistan or one of those countries, only travel if it's some sort of urgent need, right? Like one of your parents is very sick and they're dying or something like that. Something very urgent that requires you to travel, you would have to travel. I would say, okay, travel, but only in a very urgent circumstance. Other than that, I don't recommend traveling if you have a visa and you're from a Muslim majority country that's not one of those 7. If you're from one of the 7, don't travel at all, because you could be barred. So that covers the citizens, green card holders, and visa holders. There was a question about the refugees. So The refugees, so I want to make two distinctions. There's two distinctive classes legally. There's refugees and there are asylees. There's those who are seeking refuge and those who are seeking asylum. Refugees are individuals so refugees are a legal class. They're individuals who were in the refugee camps in Turkey or Jordan or wherever. They were vetted by the State Department under the the International Rescue Committee, and they were vetted and they went through a whole vetting process for several years, and they were approved, and then they were approved to come and settle here under the State Department. Those are refugees, and so once they were approved, they were given a refugee visa, right? That allows them to be in here, and they came in here. Now, if you're a refugee and you have a visa and then you're working on the process of getting a green card or whatever, the executive order on the face of it, meaning on the text on what it says, does not affect that. So if you're a refugee with a visa, even if you're from Syria or any of those, Iraq, whatever refugee country you're from, if you're in the United States, you should not be affected as far as your going forward in your process, as long as you're in the country.
No, I'm not talking about this. I'm talking about he came as a refugee and he got a green card holder.
Yeah.
He's a green card holder.
Right.
And he's out now.
Yeah.
He's a green card holder.
Yeah. So he has the rights that I mentioned that green card holders have. That means that they have a right to come in the country.
Doesn't that affect if he was a refugee, if he visited his country?
It shouldn't. So the way that the executive order it's put and the clarification that the White House made on it prior to it being suspended is that as long as he has a valid green card, he can be in this country. Even if he went to Syria, even if he's originally Syrian refugee, it doesn't matter. Now, he might face a lot of secondary screening as to why he went to Syria.
That doesn't intersect to his situation when he was a refugee.
Right. No, what I'm saying is that if he has if a person was a refugee before, has a green card now, traveled on the green card, they have the same rights as I mentioned before of anybody that has a green card. So it doesn't matter, what the refugee status was. As long as they have a valid green card, they have the rights of the green card holder that I mentioned earlier. So they should be able to enter the country. Now, if you travel to Syria or you travel to one of those places, you're definitely going to get pulled to the side for secondary screening. And if you or somebody that's traveling that's coming back in that kind of situation, what I recommend for them, or anybody, and this is general advice, if you're coming from a situation where you fear you might be pulled for secondary screening and you are not comfortable talking to customs, you went to Syria or you went to Afghanistan or something. Okay, let me answer that question in 1 second. I just want to finish my thought. What I'm saying is that if you're coming, or somebody is coming from a country, like they travel to Syria, or they have some issues, they're not comfortable coming back and doing customs, what you should do is you should arrange for a lawyer to be available at the time that their flight arrives at one of the airports. So they're arriving in Newark or JFK, somebody should contact one of the organizations we mentioned here, the ACLU, or the Association of Muslim American Lawyers, New Jersey Muslim Lawyers Association. Contact one of these organizations, get in touch with them, say, look, I have somebody so-and-so coming and they travel to Syria or they travel to such and such place. They're coming back, they don't feel comfortable. Their flight's arriving on this and this date, this and this time, this airline, this airport. And so what we can at least do is have a lawyer who's kind of on standby. And then they should have a phone where they can text the family member when they land that, we landed. And the family member knows they landed at this time. And it's been like 3 hours and they haven't come out yet. You can notify the lawyer can start making their way to the airport. And then, so when that person does go in, obviously they haven't been out for a long time, they're being questioned, then they can assert their right to a lawyer, and then the lawyer would be on his way, or on her way to the airport.
They give him the right to use the phone to contact his family or anybody.
Yeah, they usually won't seize the phone. They'll at some point they'll ask you for the phone and they'll take it, but what I'm saying is that the person should have contacted them as soon as they landed. So as soon as you landed, you're still in the plane, you could text and say, look, the plane landed. So at least your family member knows that you've landed.
In case if he got in trouble, with the
Yeah. Yeah, I'm saying that, yeah, once you get to the secondary screen, they're going to ask you for your phone and you have...
I know he's in trouble or not. This is the point.
So what I'm saying is that, so once they're going to ask you for your phone, and like I said before, you have to turn the phone over to them. But what I'm saying is that if you texted your family when you landed and it's been like 3 hours and you haven't come out, the family knows that something is up and they can contact a lawyer. The lawyer, is already on standby, and now the lawyer can make their way to the airport and start preparing if they need to do something or they need to go inside and talk to customs. They can go to because the lawyer knows what to do. They're gonna go to the airport. They're gonna talk to customs. They're gonna say so and so is being held, and I'm his lawyer. I need to see him right now. And they have to let the lawyer. They have to let the lawyer in. I don't know if that's something that they would.
I see the point. I mean,
Yeah.
if he's in trouble, how can he contact his lawyer? If he's not
So-
allowed to use it.
So what I'm saying right now is that the person should have a phone with them. Like I'm telling you that like the person who's traveling should absolutely have a phone that they know that when they land that they get text.
My point is, will they allow him to use the phone? This is the point.
Yeah, I mean like even before like if that person can notify the family even before they get to customs. Yeah, yeah.
From my personal experience, like they were not allowed to use secondary.
Yeah,
But typically, once I land,
yeah. You text.
I
Yes,
just land.
yes.
And if I'm home, then they know.
If it's been like 2-3 hours, we know that something's up, and so the lawyer can at least be there and be ready. So that's just general advice. I want to answer the question for the brother in the back had the question about the text of the order. Oh, okay, mashallah. So the text of the order does not currently say Muslim ban, and it doesn't say the word. It doesn't say that Muslims are banned or that Muslim majority countries are banned or anything like that. So it currently doesn't say that. It does begin with talking about 9/11. It talks about 9/11 as an example of why this ban is necessary. And interestingly enough, it doesn't ban Saudi Arabia. But it talks about 9/11. That's the only reference it sort of makes. And I'll share this. The oral argument. So when the U.S. Government attorney was in front of the appellate court in the Ninth Circuit, the judge asked the White House's attorney. He said, "What if the order did say Muslim ban? What if this order said Muslim ban?" And so the White House attorney said, "This is the attorney for Donald Trump." He said, "Well, then it would obviously be unconstitutional." And then he said, "But that's not what we have in front of us." So the government's attorney has conceded that if it had said Muslim ban, it would be unconstitutional, and they wouldn't. And that's why they phrased it this way, and that's why what they've done. So they haven't said that visas from all Muslim majority countries are banned. They didn't say that either. They only picked 7, and the 7 that they picked are a particular designation that was created under Obama administration. But the Obama administration State Department had created that designation for 7 countries that were dangerous for U.S. nationals to travel to, but hadn't said that it was dangerous for people coming from there to the United States. So, that was the designation that Obama used, but they just used that same designation and said these 7 countries are banned, which is how they're trying to escape it being unconstitutional. So, I mean, what the outcome of it is, we're going to see. Yes. Oh, right. Yeah, sorry. So refugees I mentioned are approved by the State Department for a visa, and they come here and they're on the back. Once the refugees are in, they're fine, and there shouldn't be a problem. Asylees are people who didn't come here through the State Department. They got here through some other means. They got here through a valid visa of some sort, maybe a visit visa or a student visa, or they somehow got here and they just stepped foot on U.S. soil. The second they step foot on U.S. soil, they say, look, if I want to be an asylee, and if I go back to my country, I'm going to be killed as a result of my political affiliations or my political speech. That's an asylee. It's a political refugee. So that's not something the State Department allows. It's something that once you get here, you have to apply for it immediately. So as soon as you step foot on U.S. soil, you can apply to the U.S. government to seek asylum here in the United States. That's an asylee. An asylee is different. Now, I've dealt with asylum cases. We dealt with a Syrian. We've had Syrians who came here on some other type of visa, but then we were able to apply for asylum and get that for them. And then once your asylum is approved, you'll also get a green card. Sorry. So I mean, like, there's two things. Once it could be pending. If it's pending, and sometimes these cases pen for like over a year, what they'll do is they'll give you a work authorization, and while it's pending, you can still be in this country, and they'll give you work authorization so you can work and be in the country while the case is pending. If your application is rejected, obviously, then you would have to go back or go somewhere else. that prevents asylees? Well, the order prevents, if the order were in place right now, there would be no way for somebody from one of those 7 countries to get here. So if you were from one of those 7 countries, it would be impossible for you to get inside the United States. You know, and what would eventually happen, and what started to happen, was that you wouldn't even be able to board a plane from another country. If you were from one of the 7 countries, you couldn't even board a plane to the United States because they knew that you're going to get turned back. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, like if it's a specific case, I can talk about it to you afterwards because there's a lot of details that go into specific cases that, you know, I don't want to get into. But mainly I wanted to cover, you know, the different classes: citizens, green cards, visas, what rights you have flying into an airport, and my advice as to like whether or not you should fly right now, whether now is a good time to travel. You know, that's kind of what I want to get across. You know, I'm done from that angle. So if there's any more questions, I'll take them. Yeah. Oh. Sorry. Domestic travel. Yeah. Yeah. Domestic travel. So from our experience in the last 2 weeks and dealing with the ACLU, we haven't seen any issues with domestic travel. So we haven't seen. I mean, domestic travel usually once you're able to, you know, once you get on a plane, you know, you have enough papers to get on a plane domestically. Once you get off, you just exit the airport. There's no real there's no customs to go through, right? Because the issue comes up when you go through customs, and Customs and Border Control is the agency that's the one that's problematic right now. So in domestic travel, there is no Customs and Border Patrol don't get involved. It's just a TSA. And TSA is just just follow their rules to get on the plane, and that's all they're concerned about. Yes. Sorry. I mean, like, you're talking about like the global entry? I mean, so the global entry is one clearance that you can get, and I think it's a limited. You go through the kiosk at a customs, and you don't have to take off your shoes yeah. So yeah, you can apply for global entry, and I think the fee is not even that high. Yeah. You can do that, but like I said, yeah, you can apply for that. That's fine, and that's gonna that'll be Yeah. Sorry? So the text of the order was that the ban on the visas on immigration from those 7 countries was 90 days, right? From the date of the order, which was January 27th, but it's been on hold. So what date it ends up being, we're not going to know until the judge decides. Yeah. So the judge put a stay on it, meaning that it's suspended. So the days since then aren't counting. So since the suspension was placed, which was last Friday, those days don't count towards the 90 days. And so when they reinstate the ban, it'll be reinstated from the day that they sort of paused it as, and it will go forward, which is going to be roughly 90 days. And then the restriction on refugees was 120 days. And I didn't get into that part, but there's also a restriction on, so for 120 days, all refugees are barred from entering the United States. Syrian refugees are barred forever from entering the United States. It's a hard bar. So Syrian refugees, there's a hard bar, like they can never enter the United States again, Syrian refugees, unless they're a minority, meaning they're Christian, they can enter. Refugees from other countries, Iraq or Warlord, there's a 120-day ban on that, and then after that they will continue taking them at a limited number, I think 50,000. So that was the refugee. Again, that's also on pause right now as we go on.
Did you try to print out as a LLC Squire, as a group from your office, print out some rules and regulations about perhaps like the nervous center or green holder?
Sure. Yes.
As a green holder or as a member of those 7 countries, or as a visa, or as different columns, some of those regulation rules, or like for an example, like you said, if they ask you for your cell phone, or if they ask you some simple questions such as so and so, if they go into the details, such as so and so, do you have a right to refuse to answer? Did you try to print such a booklet for such a questionnaire? You have a right to refuse to answer, or you have a right to say, listen, I answer your basic questions. I do not have to answer. This was at the prison of my lawyer.
Right. So,
Not only printing, it might be on video.
I'm sorry?
Not only printing, it might be on a video and
Sure.
on software.
so I mean, just to answer the question, so for my office personally, no, but the ACLU has done several booklets for each of these cases. So the ACLU has information, and what I'll do is I will send the link to. Oh, you know what I'll do is I'll have them printed out and sent to every masjid, and they can be here. The ACLU has PDFs. You can go on their website, and they have PDFs on every situation: flying in to an airport, what are your rights? Getting stopped by a police officer, what are your rights? Getting visited by a FBI agent, getting stopped by a ICE immigration officer on the street asking you for your documentation, what are your rights? So these are things that the ACLU has prepared, like booklets or pamphlets that you can read and have quick answers for. I think that's what you're talking about. So I mean, what I would recommend is, and I'm happy to get the word out to all the masajid. You know, here are the links, and then we can either have them printed out and send to all the masajid, have them available, or the links are available so people can go and find them on their own. But we can do that, inshallah.
That would be great because hopefully it would be handy
Yeah.
to find out and give them some info
Yeah.
for different categories and different questionnaires.
Absolutely.
So many different
Yes. Right now, there's nothing, and there's no specific order against any other country besides those seven, or any nationality or any ethnicity behind those seven. There's nothing specifically about Palestinians or Jordanians. If you are a green card holder, and you said you're a Syrian national, right? Or you're Iraqi national. So if you're a green card holder in Iraqi national, based on the clarification of the White House, well, right now while the ban is suspended, you can travel. We're not sure when it would be reinstituted, so I wouldn't recommend traveling for a long time. But based on what the White House has clarified, if you are a green card holder, a valid green card, doesn't matter if you're national of one of those 7 countries. If you have a valid green card, you will be let back into the country, and that ban doesn't apply to you based on it. Now, whether or not you'll be subject to secondary questioning or screening, is a discretion of the Customs and Border Patrol. So my advice is, if you're a green card holder, you have a little bit more discretion to travel now. And I think if you want to travel immediately in the next couple of weeks, and just do a trip now will be great, because right now we're still under the suspension. I don't expect the court to decide on this for another, at the soonest, I would expect the court to decide in a month or so, or maybe 2 months. What could happen is that the president could modify the executive order or put out an executive order, which we don't know, because those happen quickly. But if you have a green card, on the face of it, what the White House has said, what the executive order says, you will be let back into the country. How long what does what take?
The courts and the
So I mean, this is how it works. You have a federal trial court, which the trial court's job is to discover facts. So in the trial court, what they're doing is they're saying, here's the case. The case is the state of Washington saying that this executive order hurts us and is unconstitutional, right? So now the president's or the White House's attorney is going to say, well, give us all the documents that show why this hurts you. So now they're going to go back and they dig through all these documents. And then the state of Washington is going to ask the president, show us all the documents as to why you think this executive order is going to effectively stop terrorism or make us safer. And they got to dig through their record and say, look, here's all the documents we have. And they have all these papers and documents. And then the attorneys are going to use those documents to prepare briefs and then go to trial in front of the judge. And the judge is going to look at what they've provided on the record and make a decision. That's the process. Now, this process can take several months. Now, depending on how many documents there are, how quickly they're doing it, I know that the court's sort of under pressure to kind of decide on this quickly as well. But that's the process. So what happened was the court sued in the trial court. Now, if there's an issue of law, not an issue of fact, not whether this fact or that fact, if it's an issue of law that they disagree upon, then they can appeal to the appellate court. The appellate court only looks at a point of law. So in this case, they said, while we're discovering all these facts, we're going to put a stop on the order, on the executive order. So the White House appealed to the Ninth Circuit saying that, it's fine, we'll go through the facts, but the suspension shouldn't have happened because as a point of law, there should be no suspension. That went to the appellate court. So the White House lost again at the appellate court level, and all the judges said, no, the suspension is fine. Now, the next thing that can happen, there's two things that can happen. One is the White House agrees, okay, fine, we lost. Let's just go back to trial court and fight our case at the trial court level. The second thing the White House can do is appeal to the Supreme Court. And then it will become a Supreme Court case. And if that happens, again, that will take longer because now you have to prepare briefs for the Supreme Court, and then you got to go in front of the judges there, do your oral arguments, and then Supreme Court has to issue a decision. And then if the Supreme Court affirms the appellate court, then the president has no choice but to go back to the trial court and then continue on with the discovery, which has been on pause because they're appealing. So it's making the process take longer by appealing. I mean, actually, the president, if he hadn't appealed, they could have actually resolved it faster in the trial courts. But I don't know, they're trying to make a point or something. Mm-hmm. It would go into effect as a new order until somebody challenges it in court. And what we saw happen last time is that it could literally be challenged in court within 24 hours. So and I haven't heard, so far all the executive orders, I've heard about them from, all the people that were dealing with the ACLU, all the organizations, all the people that are on this. There's a massive thread of people who are communicating, and we get some insider information, and we get to know, we even get to see the text of the orders for them that before they come out. So I haven't seen a proposed modified text of the same order. I've heard that there's executive orders that are coming down on different aspects also involving Muslims, which we're waiting to see whether or not he's actually going to sign them or not. One of the major ones is the designation of Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. That's one of the major executive orders that we're actually expecting to happen soon. So we'll see when that happens. So my guess is that the president is not going to modify this particular order, and he's going to have to let it play out in court and see what happens. Because if he does put out a modified version, the state of Washington would immediately sue on that, would immediately extend the lawsuit to sue on that executive order, and it would be suspended while the thing. So if he tries the same thing over and over again, it's going to keep getting suspended. He's going to go a different direction now and try something else, and then we'll have to wait till we challenge that. So that's how it goes. Is there any more questions on just any of this, the travel or the order or anything immigration related? Yes. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Right. So first thing about dual citizens. So there's two. So the United States doesn't have a dual citizenship specific program, right? Basically, like if you become a citizen of the United States, you're a citizen of the U.S. The U.S. doesn't require you to revoke any previous citizenships, right? Now, so this depends on the law of the country from which you're coming from. If the country which you're coming from, they have a rule that if you become a citizen of the United States, then you automatically revoke your citizenship, then obviously you can't be a dual national. If the country that you're coming from says, you can have a U.S. citizenship and you still maintain the citizenship, then you'll become a dual national. Now, in the case of Syria, and from what I understand is that you can't even revoke your Syrian citizenship. So, like if you're a Syrian national, and you become a U.S. Citizen, you'll be a U.S. citizen dual national, and you can't revoke it. Now, under the clarification of the White House after the executive order came out, under the clarification, and the CBP clarified this as well, they're going to judge you based on the documents you present to them. So if you're a dual national and you're traveling and you present to them a Syrian passport, they're going to judge you based on that, and they're probably going to bar you from entry. But if you present to them the U.S. passport, they're going to treat you as a U.S. citizen. And that's what they said on their website. They said that we will treat you based on the documents you present to us. So if you're a U.S. citizen, you should travel on your U.S. passport, enter on U.S. passport, present only U.S. passport to the customs. The other issue is that if you're say a Canadian national, let's say you're a Canadian Syrian dual national and you live in Canada and you want to visit the U.S., under the order, you would be barred from entry. Even though you have a Canadian passport, you would be barred because you don't have a U.S. passport and you are a Syrian national. They would bar you on the thing. Well, it still tells you what country you're a national of. Yeah, even your U.S. citizenship says national. Yeah. So they will know, and also they can do a very simple thing like ask you, and you can't lie to them. So that's another way they'll do it. But they'll already know this stuff before we get in there. So that's the issue of dual national. The second question was about, sorry, I forgot. What was the second question? Oh, yes. Yes. So I've seen a lot of things on Facebook, and I've seen a lot of people on Facebook put out things like just a flat out, if you're Muslim, don't travel or don't leave the country. And it's a little bit, to me, so, this advice might differ from person to person. My advice, based on, speaking with the ACLU and speaking with their lawyers and speaking with everybody that kind of knows what's kind of going on and keeping track of what's going on, I don't have a very doom and gloom sort of outlook as other people do. I don't think that this is such a bad thing. I think the executive order created chaos the first day that it came out, and I think that it was intended to create chaos. I mean, the whole purpose was to make it chaotic, right? And I think they intended to do that. But the end result is what happened. The court barred it on the first day. There was a bar on the order. It gave 7 days for us to get detainees in, and then obviously now it's suspended altogether. It might lose overall. That's possible that would happen. And there was an outpouring of support. There was a humongous outpouring of support for Muslims. Everybody came out. If you were at the airports, I don't know if anybody was at the airports 2 weeks ago. Yeah, if you were at the airports, it was phenomenal. You were there, it was like 90% of the people there were not Muslim. And they were there at the airports, and they were protesting. And at Newark Airport, there was 10 detainees that first night. And everybody showed up, and they did not leave. Like, not a single person left until the very last detainee was released. And that was like 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And so everybody was there, and they made sure that happened, and that everybody's rights were respected. So I think that outpouring of respect and love that we get from people in this country show, I think that shines much brighter than anything that we're getting from the White House. Another thing is that the White House, by the actions it's taking, it's making itself it's showing sort of a clear, a negativity towards Muslims, and that clear negativity sometimes is better than a White House that shows us a friendly face, but then has a negative impact on the community, and people can't look past the charming sort of friendly face. So I think overall, it's not that negative. The outcome of it was overly positive. I think it's a good thing for Muslims. I think it's making a lot of Muslims wake up and kind of like know that this is the rights, and they have to protect their rights, but also the protection of our rights depends on the protection of constitutional rights, right? So if the rights of another group of people is being eroded, then we have to protect them, because those rights are ultimately going to be our rights that come down. I think Muslims are waking up to that. I think I saw a lot of Muslims getting more involved and taking action and opposing government action, which I think is very good for Muslims to be doing. And I think that we're getting a lot of support and a lot of allies, and a lot of great things are coming out of it. So I don't think it's that bad. I don't think that Muslims should say, well, we're not going to travel because we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. I think if you have a citizenship and you have a green card, you can travel. If you have a visa, like I said, that's the only situation where I would say if you have a visa and you don't have an urgent reason to be outside the United States, then I would recommend not traveling in that case. But citizen, green card, do that. Take the precautions, like I told you. Be prepared, and inshallah everything will be fine. Yes. So this Muslim Brotherhood thing stems from several I don't know, like a decade-long worth of action or work that was done by several organizations, these Islamophobic organizations that have been working and putting together work, and I've been following them since 2005, and they've been putting forth this whole thing about Muslim Brotherhood since then. And what the president is going to put forward, this is coming from Steve Bannon, like what the president is putting forth is going to be something similar to what those Islamophobes have been saying about Muslim Brotherhood. It's not the way that you and I might understand Muslim Brotherhood, it's the way that they're trying to portray what they think Muslim Brotherhood is or what it should be. There's two things on that. First, Ted Cruz introduced legislation into Congress that would designate Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. Now, that's interesting, but the legislative branch doesn't have the authority to designate. So what Ted Cruz is doing is more of like a political stunt. It's more of like a publicity kind of thing, appealing to his base to do something like that. But the legislative branch doesn't have the authority to make designations. Only the executive branch can make a designation. And it can do so under the Department of State or the Department of Treasury. And they've been doing that a lot, especially since 9/11. And after 9/11, there was what they call the specially designated nations, the SDN, and the specially designated persons, the SDP, which is a list under the Department of Treasury in the Office of Foreign Assets Control, which is, as you mentioned, an international designation. So what they did after 9/11, and I mean, I don't want to get too deep into it, but after 9/11, what they did was they started designating all these organizations, individuals, and countries. And so because under Department of Treasury, any money that was coming from those people or those organizations, those countries crossing borders would be subject to all kinds of legal sort of restrictions. Banks would be responsible for it. Like there's, banks might be responsible if they allowed the money to come in. They might be held responsible for it. And we saw that happen with the Dubai Islamic Bank and the National Commercial Bank in Saudi Arabia. So that's the nature of designations. And so only the president can do that, and it would happen under executive order. Now, the way the Islamophobes understand Muslim Brotherhood is that Muslim Brotherhood is this one cohesive international organization that's infiltrating the U.S. government with these agents who are, undercover Muslim Brotherhood, but then pretending to be American, and they're infiltrating the U.S. government, and then pretty soon the U.S. government is going to be filled with Muslim agents, and then one day the whole government's Muslim, and the Muslims are taking over, and that's the narrative that they have about Muslim Brotherhood. And they think that this is happening through several organizations in the U.S. So they're not even interested in international Muslim Brotherhood. They're interested in what Muslim Brotherhood is doing here, and they're saying that it's sending in these shadow agents through these organizations that they're putting up. And the organization they're particularly interested in is CARE, first of all. They're interested in MSA, and then NATE, which is the North American Islamic Trust. The North American Islamic Trust holds the deed to about 1/3 of the masajid in the United States, right? Because it's a trust of all the properties, essentially, right? So getting to NATE if they were to link Muslim Brotherhood with NATE, then they can essentially freeze 1/3 of the masajid in the United States, their bank accounts, and all these kind of things. That's one big asset they want to go after. CARE is an organization that they think is like this undercover operative that's slowly putting Muslims into positions of power, and then one day the Muslims will say we've taken over the government, and then the country is under Sharia law. That's what they say about CARE. Now, CARE obviously is not doing that. CARE is not capable of doing that. But CARE is an organization that's they have a national, but they have several chapters, and each chapter is very different, right? So the CARE New Jersey is not as active or not as big as CARE Chicago, for example, or CARE Florida, which is the most active nowadays. CARE San Francisco. They're all very different. They have a different outlook, and they have a different goal based on the people that are there. And it's just like an organization that's trying to do some civil rights work. So their designation of Muslim Brotherhood is trying to stop this thing from happening, and it's trying to accomplish it by linking Muslim Brotherhood to these organizations that are in America. And I think that the problem they're going to have is one, defining Muslim Brotherhood even in the international sense, because even internationally, Muslim Brotherhood is not this one singular cohesive kind of organization. It differs from country to country, and in Egypt, where it was banned, it's hard to even pin down who's a member, who's not, things like that. And then to link it, to say that that CARE is directly linked with Muslim Brotherhood, or that MSA or ISNA or Islamic Relief even, or NATE are directly linked with a Muslim Brotherhood operative coming here and establishing I mean, they're going to have some legal issues there, but that's their goal. That's what they're trying to accomplish. And what they really want to do is they want to make it so that every Muslim is afraid of participating in the masajid or going to care or donating to Islamic Relief. They want to make Muslims afraid of doing that. It's called the chilling effect. And then by doing that, the Muslims will be afraid to come out of their houses because they don't want to get designated. Or if they give a donation to Islamic Relief, then they're providing material support to terrorists. So that's kind of what they're after. And when it comes out, like I said, just like this thing, the ACLU and the other organizations will challenge it. And we'll see what happens with that, inshallah. Okay. So, I'll end here, inshallah, and then any other questions, I'll be around for a little bit. But Jazakallah khair, thank you for having me and giving the opportunity to talk. And more questions, if I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Jazakallah khair.